Welcome to Hallway Conversations with Ed Leaders, where your hosts Chris, Jeff, and Mark bring you behind-the-scenes insights from the front lines of education. Chris, Jeff, and Mark are seasoned education leaders who provide coaching and expertise to support school districts. Together, they walk the halls with top educational leaders, diving into candid discussions about the challenges, topics, and innovations shaping schools today. From pressing issues to transformative solutions, their conversations are insightful, unfiltered, and packed with practical advice. Get ready for real talk with real leaders who are shaping the future of education. Whether you're in the classroom, the boardroom, or tuning in from home, come away with strategies and ideas you can apply on your own educational journey. Now, let's join Chris, Jeff, and Mark for another enlightening episode of Hallway Conversations with Ed Leaders.
Welcome back to the Hallway Conversations with Education Leaders podcast. I'm Chris Galloway. I'm a longtime education leader and a coach of superintendents, principals, and leaders in education.
Hey, I'm Jeff. I am a reform principal. I currently am working with districts with planning and coaching and things like that. And again, part-time podcaster now.
Hey, all, glad to be back with you all. This is Mark, school leader supporting principals and teachers.
Well, we hope that everybody had a wonderful Thanksgiving. We took a little break from podcasting just so we could spend some time with our families and catch up on work from being out. But we're excited to be back with you today. Today, we're going to be talking about special education, how it's tied to education leadership. And Jeff actually received this topic from one of our listeners. And so just a reminder to the listeners out there, if you have any topics or hot topics you'd like to hear about, send it to our email at questions@edthoughtpartners.com. That's edthoughtpartners.com, questions@edthoughtpartners.com. So Jeff, tell us a little bit about the question you got.
Yeah, so it was around standard operating procedures and how if you're coming into a leadership role on campus, special ed is so important and has so many rules and laws on top of making sure that you're doing the right thing for kids, right? How do you make sure as a leader that you're up to speed and making the right decisions? And in the context of coming out of COVID, where everything changed and we've all switched to, we'll just hop on a Zoom and do a quick training that way. Are we getting to the depth that we need, right? And so it was an interesting thought because it made me think about being on a campus. And I mean, like, I would live in the gray unless it was special ed, right? Then that's black and white. There is no middle ground, right? That's the feds you're messing with all of a sudden. And I remember I would have to go check in. I'd have to have this particular person actually was one of the people I'd go to on my campus and just say, hey, are we making the right call? And I think that was her point too, is like, shouldn't we have somebody that we would be able to go to, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what do y'all think about that?
Yeah, that's a great point because when I was a principal, I had my go-to person. My go-to person was my lead sped teacher on campus. I was in a high needs elementary campus that had a lot of mobility. And because we had a lot of mobility, there was a lot of kids who came to us that were not identified as sped, but did attribute some of these sped behaviors like destroying classrooms, throwing things, being violent, those type of things. And so, I really relied on him to let me know how to communicate with our central office, because I think so many times central office steps in and they're trying to keep the numbers down, or they don't want to move a student to another campus because, my campus had a autistic unit, but it didn't have a back unit or behavior unit. So when I had kids that fit that category, then I had to go through the hoops to try to get it done. And when I would ask them if we could call a ARD, sometimes they wouldn't let me. And as a new principal, I didn't know what to do. So I actually reached out to our legal team and actually had the lawyers come in, and they said, no, you're the principal. You can call an ARD. The central office needs to support you. They can't prevent that from happening. So, we tried to do what was best for kids, and support them. And so because of that, and having someone that I could go to that knew the language, knew what to look for, knew how to support teachers, that was super important. But if you don't have that as a leader on a campus, that's something I think you need to be successful.
Yeah, this takes me way back to when I was a first year teacher, and I remember sitting in an art, and it was probably one of my first arts ever. And there's a decision being made about a student who received some resource hours in my ELA class, and the student couldn't read. The student could barely form or write a sentence or two, and so probably functioning like at a kindergarten level, but they're in middle school. And so the resource teacher says something like, "Okay, well, I think he's doing just fine in the general ed class, and it's the least restricted environment, so we're going to leave him there." And I almost felt like, wait, what? Like, why are you speaking for me? Here I am as a teacher, and I know that's not what I'm seeing every single day. And then I kind of felt bad because I was saying, can I not serve this student? I'm the teacher. I'm supposed to be able to meet the needs of the student. And so I really didn't say anything. But after that, I just didn't sit well. So I go to the principal, and the principal says, "No, let me teach you a couple of things, and here's what's supposed to happen." So we actually came back to ARD, and we found the proper placement for this student, and they did get some more resource hours. But again, being a first time teacher,
Hmm.
I didn't know that, and so I wonder, like you said, Jeff, like, are we teaching teachers to be advocates? Are we teaching what it means? Here's what the art process looks like. And I was a classically trained teacher. I went through, 4 years of this is what you got to do to be a teacher, and I was barely learning the ropes, but I knew it didn't sit well, and I
Hmm.
knew that
Hmm.
we weren't serving the student well.
Yeah, I think it gets to the standard operating procedures. So interesting dynamic that I think we're talking about here. And, as campus leaders, assistant principals, principals, all that, we're like right in the middle sometimes, because
Hmm.
Chris, I was here and you had to like really push and almost go around central office. And then Mark, you had to advocate for yourself and go to the principal so they would advocate for you, right? And so this principal is in the center.
Hmm.
But, because then sometimes you've got, I mean, let's be honest, right? Like with some people that want a kid tested, I'm doing air quotes if you're not watching. Okay, well, they're going to get tested, great, and then they're going to be in your class tomorrow. So like
Hmm.
what is that going to do? There's no pixie dust. But at the same time, you can't just tell a teacher, well, too bad, because no, really, if they're coming to you and they are seeing some stuff, then we need to support them. And then how do you drive that point home with central office, right? And so it's an interesting spot to be in, and I think it's tough sometimes, right?
You made an interesting point, Jeff, about as the administrator, you're kind of the in-between person. I always told that the administrator is there to be there for the student, but is also to protect the district, to keep from like an advocate coming in and asking for things that are unrealistic that we can't support, or a parent not knowing what to ask for because they were searching online and they don't have a clear understanding of, what the needs for their student is in an educational environment because we're the educational experts, right? But I do think that the problem we run into sometimes is we don't staff these ARDs. The administrator isn't part of the staffing process. And in a large campus, I was on a campus as an administrator with 3,700 kids. We had 10 administrators, and sometimes, an administrator that was supposed to be at an ARD because it was in their alpha, they couldn't go because they were breaking up a fight or they were dealing with an arrest or whatever it might be. And so then they would call another administrator to cover for an ARD, or let's say that administrator is out sick, because of an emergency or whatever it might be. And then you switch with another administrator, and now that other administrator has no idea about the needs of that student. They're in an ARD trying to make the best decision for the campus and the student and supporting the situation. And so, I think having an SOP where if you are the administrator who's supposed to be at that ARD and you're on campus, then you need to go, and if not, then there needs to be a pre-staffing before that meeting for the new administrator, and you got to catch that another administrator up. So, and one more thing I'll mention too that stands out to me is we usually pull one general ed teacher to go to the yard. There are four general ed teachers that support that student. And if you don't have everybody's voice at the table, like Mark said, you might have the math teacher who doesn't have any issues with that student, but then you got the reading teacher that really is struggling with helping that student. So if you don't have everybody at the table and all the voices there, then what are you doing that's going to benefit that student?
I also think about constraints right now, right? Budget constraints. A very
Mm,
real conversation that I've been having just the last few days is we know that our students need support. And as a central office team, we know that even if we were to post something today, we're not going to have a teacher or a para or whatever it is that we're looking for that can provide the service tomorrow, right? And so I think back to Jeff, when you were saying like, who do we go to? What are the standard operating procedures? Are we building capacity with other teachers? Um, how are we meeting the student's need at the end of the
Hmm.
day?
Hmm.
And so knowing that we have constraints and knowing that people have the best intent, and they may be trying to post and fill positions and then onboard. Um, I also wonder, knowing that this is our current reality, what are we doing to support the knowledge of other teachers, of administrators, because that student is going to be there, right?
Hmm.
Whether they qualify for special education services or not, they're in the classroom today.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it's like I think, it comes down to process, processes and systems and all that. And I think that, to Chris's point and your point, Mark, you've got to spread the knowledge, right? And that could be done with, I'm just going to really work hard and be the one that's always in those meetings and make sure I tell everybody, or maybe it's thinking through like, what would it be like if we could create a system where every teacher gives input and it's housed somewhere? If it's the teacher that spends the most time with that kid, if it's the special ed, the official special ed teacher, is it somebody that could house all that information? And then staffing, right? You've got to like schedule staffings just as much as you staff ARDs. I know, kind of to shift a little bit and talk more about that, I was blessed with, in my first district, I was principal, Shannon. I'm not going to say her last name, but Shannon taught me how to do staffing, the power of staffing, and then to have, she was a special ed person from district level, right? But she was worked with my campus extensively. I guess we were in trouble, but just because that was her job. But she taught also, here's a funny one, if you've been a principal too, she taught me when I needed to speak up. Like, you're going to need to say some things here. And then I still use this line, y'all know, if you've been in a meeting with me. Then there's times when she would look at me and say, your job right now is to smile and look pretty. Like,
Yeah.
dude, I got it. You got it. She said, but if that changes, I'm gonna nod at you, and then you got to come in and you got to do, there's other things that we've talked about where you've got to stand up and talk about these different things. So, yeah, but it goes back to standard operating. You've got to know your stuff, and I think it's those processes and routines.
Yeah, I'd like to add to this conversation a little bit. It's something came up this past weekend. As you guys know, and some of the listeners may know, I teach at Texas State in the superintendent certification course, and a couple of my students brought up discipline and SPED students. The majority of kids
Mhm.
that fall under discipline or get sent to alternative school are identified as SPED, and I think as administrators, it's easy to get caught up in the need to support. Now I'm gonna use quotes, support teachers, because they always say you're not supporting me because you're sending the kid back to my class, um, and we get caught up in that when differentiated discipline is needed for SPED students. And following the behavior intervention plan is super important, but if there isn't one or it needs to be adjusted, then we need to advocate to go back to the ARD committee to have that adjusted. But we need to understand the impact of to that student, because I think that's really easy how we get caught up in the school to prison pipeline. As we know, many of prisoners in America were identified or could be identified as special ed as well. And so I think that's something I'm super passionate about. We got to do what's best for kids, not always what's best for the adults. And I know that's going to be a controversial topic, but something I think we need to really consider.
Yeah, this reminds me of a conversation. We were looking at RDA data, and actually, the SPED director was presenting, and some of the people in the room had never seen this data, and so I asked her, before you continue, let me talk about why this is really important. Because yes, RDA in Texas looks at the program level, right? So what is district office doing to make sure that you have a strong system? But I had to remind the folks in the room that Yes, this is most definitely a systematic report that looks at the processes and procedures, but the kids are not sitting in central office, right? The kids are
Hmm.
sitting on campus. So, what is the relationship between what we're saying and doing, right? What we ask you to follow and the procedures that we say, make sure you know when you have to have an MDA, make sure you know that you have to have these things. Because when people start skipping, because it is a tedious process, right?
Hmm.
Hmm.
Or you have somebody brand new who may be in UAP, and it's their first one, and it doesn't look typical like the other DAP placements. They're just going to skip to what they know, and they may skip a couple of pieces. And
Hmm.
so the conversation was really about, yes, this data is giving us a report of how we're functioning and where we're at, and the needs that we have to change to meet, or the things that we have to do to change at central office to meet the needs of the campuses. But as much that I wanted to own at the at the district level, it also needs to be owned at the campus level.
Hmm.
And at the end of the training, what we ended up talking about, and principals came up and said, I really hadn't looked at data in this way,
Mm.
because I'm always just so caught up on star. And
Hmm.
star is what makes and breaks us, and star is what's so public, and star is where we get our rating from. But this also is important because at the end of the day, we're not following sometimes the law because we forget, because we don't know, because we're in a time crunch, because we have a misstep and we do this before that.
Hmm.
And so they were just really thankful that we were just stopping and pausing and saying, well, we want to own this at central office because this is evaluating the systems that we have to do it in partnership. So we're here to support you, but we also need your support to ensure that whatever we set in process, we actually follow.
Yeah, the I'm not going to say the best. One of the best additions I have ever made to a campus came from what you're talking about, Mark. We were looking at data. We were looking at why are some kids on our discipline list more than others? What are we doing in the class? Hey, I brought in somebody to help me bridge that. To like, those are numbers, these are kids, these are some practical things we can do. Ended up managing to steal that dude from central office to be an assistant principal for me. And it absolutely fundamentally changed a lot of stuff we did because we had a practitioner who knew what was going on and could connect the data to people. And then I was lucky enough to have a teacher on that same campus that had that same vibe, right? Well, actually, several teachers. I had a behavior unit with really interesting dude that ran it was great, is great, and a teacher that was in the classroom for me. But yeah, making that stuff real, right? And here's a phrase. I know we're probably running late on time. Here's the big kicker for me that when I learned this, precipitating event. What was the precipitating event for that? Like, what do you mean he just popped off? No, nope. Was it in math? Was it in reading? Did you ask him to read out loud? Did you ask her to solve a problem at the board? What was the thing that did it? And I think that precipitating event maybe was my oh man, yeah, what got us going?
I heard recently someone talking about how to curve the discipline issues in schools, and I'm thinking about the board level, right? So the board sometimes hears from teachers that we're not being supported. I got this kid, and their first notion is we'll punish the kid, get rid of the kid, suspend the kid, whatever it might be. Well, one thing I heard to curve that is to put a number on it, like money, right? So
Mm.
in Texas, we have average daily attendance. Every time you suspend a kid, you lose that attendance money, which could be anywhere from $35 to $60 a day, depending on your days that you have. So when you add that up in a large district, that could be
Mhm.
hundreds of thousands of dollars. And when you tell a principal, you want an additional staff member, but you suspended 100 sped students.
Mhm.
Hey, for 3 days each, what does that come out to? What is that money? And if you really want to spend that money and get that money for the next year. So something to consider is every time you suspend a kid, you're actually losing money as well. So,
I'm gonna jump in out of line here too, because it's also like, yeah, you know how much money you lost? Yeah, you're also, how's that working out for you? How's your discipline man working? If you're, if
It
you
doesn't
continue to,
change.
wow, nothing's changing. Maybe we should look at what's happening.
Yeah, well, some and those students they're smart. You know, they know that when they get suspended, if it was because of math or it was because of reading,
Mhm.
now I don't have to do that. And so, and plus, I get the attention I wanted. You know, and so it they some are attention seeking and some wanted to avoid the actual academics.
I think the last thing I'll say here is, and you mentioned it, Chris. You know what these conversations lead to, especially when we start looking at root cause, right? That precipitating event is some really harsh realities that this really does impact our students of color. And we don't
Mm-hmm.
want to have that conversation. And so we tiptoe around it and say, well, I'm not seeing this somewhere else, right?
Hmm.
Hmm.
And so, if anything, I think looking at the data, having conversations with both central office and campus level people, and saying, what is the data actually showing us?
Hmm.
It's showing us what we know because we see it, right? Because when we think of who are these kids and who are the numbers, we can see their face.
Hmm.
But until we really then say, okay, so now what? And we start really thinking of different actions, we're going to continue to see the same thing. And so I don't know that we really address the issue. We just push it down a couple of years or a year or till next time. And now I'll submit whatever I got to submit for compliance. But did we truly build capacity so that we can serve the students better? And that's really hard to do for all the reasons I just named.
And if you are stuck on, I'm not sure what to do, so I'm going to wing it, I don't know that you ever get that deep with that fundamental, and like this is the fundamental root cause that we need to address. And if you don't know what you're doing in general terms, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but if it's just sort of hit and miss and you're not set on standard operating procedures, maybe that just gets in the way. And it allows you to cloud the judgment. It allows you to kick it down the road a little bit.
Yeah, don't use the excuse that I don't have a person in my district or on my campus to support me. Look for the person you need,
Yeah.
whether it's a consultant, a service center that supports you, or if you're a superintendent or a principal, reach out to other districts and see who they have
Mhm.
and ask if you could borrow that person for a day to kind of figure out what's next.
Yeah.
All right, guys, good topic today. One thing I want to share with our listeners is that you can find us at our website, which is www.edthoughtpartners.com. That's edthoughtpartners.com. Find us on LinkedIn. We do have a YouTube channel that this will be posted on hopefully soon. It'll probably be out on audio before it'll be
Hmm.
posted, but we're going to get those videos up on YouTube as soon as possible, as well as go check out our website and check out our coaching certification program that we have and become a board certified coach so you can support education leaders too. All right, until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Hallway Conversations with Ed Leaders. If you found today's discussion enlightening, please subscribe to our podcast and share it with fellow educators and leaders who can also benefit from these conversations. Are you looking to enhance your leadership skills? Visit our website at the Center for Strategic Leadership. There, you can register for our nationally accredited coaching certification program. This program offers you an opportunity to earn a board-certified coach certification and become a strategic leadership coach, empowering you to make a significant impact in your educational community. Don't miss this chance to elevate your leadership. Join us and transform your educational leadership journey today. Until next time, keep leading, keep learning, and keep inspiring. See you in the next episode of Hallway Conversations with Ed Leaders.